back to the Tin Barn. I'm Pragmatic Lee, and today's video is going to be continuing in the series we started several videos back. Let's see, I think it's about 3 videos back. We did one on machining matching dovetails, male and female dovetails. Then in the next video in that series, we added a gib to that matching dovetail set. And then in my last video, we actually assembled all the pieces, put an MT3 on, MT3 adapter onto it to fit in the lathe tailstock, added a pointer to it, added a micro adjust to come up with the tailstock offset. Today we're going to put this to use. This is as I say, the 4th video in this series, and should be the last one in this series. It's really been a fun project for me. I hope you've enjoyed following along. There's been a considerable amount of mill work. There's going to be some lathe work in here today. We're going to cut some tapers with it, without a taper attachment or without using the compound. So let me get the camera over here on the workbench and get a better idea of what's in store for today's video. As I stated in my previous video, I didn't have any experience with this, so I was gonna go off camera and try making an MT3 taper, Morse taper 3, using this jig, using this fixture, and see how it turned out. I started out with a piece of 1-inch stock, about like such, and was attempting to duplicate the MT3, and here's what I've come up with. It worked fabulous. I'm extremely pleased with it. I can see on here I'm getting a little more contact right up in this area at the top, and getting contact down here. Not seeing quite as much in the middle in there, but I can tell you that it holds tight. I turned it around and put it in an adapter in the headstock and turned this end down here using this to hold, and it held fine. So what we're going to do today, we're going to take a couple more pieces of stock. We've got this another piece of 1 inch here that, let's see, it's about a little over 6 inches long. Going to make another MT3. Now I do have needs for these, and I said earlier this might be the last video in this series. It's just according to how time permits. I may save to the next video because I've got a use for 2 of these MT3s right now. If I have time in this video, I'll add it into it. If not, add it into next week's video or the next video. We're also going to take a piece of 3/4 inch stock, and this one is, let's see, about 4.5 inches long, and we're going to make an MT2. I've got the remains of an old wood lathe that out under the shelter that you may have seen in some of my previous videos. I use it to, if I've got a piece of real rusty stock, I'll mount it in on that old lathe that I pieced back together. I actually got it out of a trash pile, and use the pipe sander or pipe grinder on it to clean it up before I bring it in here on the lathe. Tailstock on it takes an MT2. So we're going to turn that piece down as well. The first thing I want to do though is get the camera turner, get these pieces in the mill, in the lathe, excuse me. I'll have the camera turning around with the collet chuck. Just going to turn this little end like you see on the tapers. All that is basically the tang or where the tang would be for ejecting it out of the tailstock or whatever you put this into. So let me get the camera turned around to the lathe and we'll get started on that. Okay, I'm turning around to the lathe now. Got the collet chuck on the lathe. Got a 3/4 collet in there now. I'm going to put our piece of stock in for the MT2. And what we're going to work on right now is, again, just the small end down here. That has a depth of, let's see, 140 thousandths. So I'll zero out right there. Come in 140 thousandths. This doesn't have to be precise, just that's at about 145 right there. I'll bring the stop over and lock that down. Be sure that repeats. Yeah, that's 140 thousandths. And we want to go into a diameter of 540. So I'm going to make a couple cuts on there, and then we'll put the mic on and set a dimension on the lathe. That measures 686. So we'll set a dimension on the DRO. We want 0.560 minus 0.686. So that's 126 thousandths we got left to go. All right, now I'm going to change the collet out and do the same thing on our 1-inch piece. All right, this has a diameter of 0.750. For a length of 0.260. So again, we'll set our zero on the DRO right there. All right, and just like before, I'll make a couple of passes and then we'll get a measurement. The only reason I'm taking a little bit off that shoulder there, that's where the small end of our taper will be. But I'm just taking that off just to get rid of that sharp edge while I'm working on it. So now I'm going to get the lathe set up. I'm going to take the collet chuck off, and we're going to get set up to turn between centers. All right, I've got an array of cameras set up around over here now. Because this is basically the most important part of this video and even this series, is how to set up this attachment that we've put onto the into our tailstock for turning tapers. Now, I'm not going to put the big face plate on here. What I've done is just put a kicker arm in one of the holes that the chuck mounts on. I've put a couple bolts in the other two, just as a little bit of counterweight, offset weight. My spindle has an MT5 taper, so I've already cleaned that out, so I know that's clean. Now, this adapter is MT5 down to an MT3. We'll set that in there. Now we'll take our workpiece with a little homemade lathe dog, and this is the end that we turn down. It's going to be the small end. I'm going to run that up and lock that down. All right. We'll just leave the lathe dog over here out of the way for right now. Now, let's come in here on the indicator. Well, first let me give you a little background on an MT3. Most of the information on this little spreadsheet I've made is available, or the pertinent pieces of information are available on dozens of different charts on the internet. But an MT3, Morse taper 3, the three biggest things you're concerned about: large end and the small end and the length. And from that you can of course subtract the small end from the long end. That gives a difference of 160 thousandths. Divide that by this length, and that is a taper per inch of 50 thousandths. And we're going to be working on the lathe, so we'll only be dealing with one side of it at the time. So half of that is 25 thousandths. And if you look at most of the Morse taper, not all of them, but the two we'll be dealing with, the number 2 and number 3, the lathe or the taper per inch is 50 thousandths. Now I just added in my spreadsheet, if we go 1 inch, inch and a half, 2, and so forth. Right now, I know for travel, I can get clear 4 inches on that. So we're looking 100 thousandths at 25 thousandths per inch. If we move on the z-axis 4 inches, we should read an offset of 100 thousandths. So let's come in here, and I'm just really not sure how well you'll be able to see this indicator. Let me get this kind of set up on close to the center there. And I've put just a little blue mark on there where I've got 0. Let's see, I'm going to set that right at the edge, right at the end here. Now up here on the DRO, I'm going to 0 out. We want to travel 4 inches down here. And then we want to use our jig that we made, our tailstock offset, to move this in 100 thousandths on the dial, one complete revolution. So if we watch the DRO up here on the z-axis, let's come to 4 inches. All right, now I'm going to just leave these thumb screws just snug, and I'm going to turn this in until I read 100 thousandths on the dial. And again, hopefully you can see on the indicator, but I'm reading 100 thousandths now. Now let's go back to 0 again, because when I've moved this right here, I also move this a minute amount over here. So let's go back to 0. Or we can actually find us another 0. It doesn't have to be right there. And we'll reset to 0 on our cross slide. 0 out again. Let's come to 4 inches now. All right, now we're reading about 5 thousandths shy. So I'll adjust out just a little bit more to 0. Now we're going to do this 2 or 3 times, resetting the DRO at 0 each time. I'm dead on my dial. Come to 4 inches. And I am dead on zero, right on. So I'm going to tighten down my thumb screws. I have the offset now. And what I'll do, I can remove the indicator now. Come over here and set the lathe dog up. All right, I'm going to move some of these cameras out of the way. But what we've done now, we've put in a 4-inch travel in here, we've put 100 thousandths offset in this direction. See why it's important to try to have this as level as possible so that when you are adjusting here, you're adjusting on the x-axis and not a combination of the x and y. But what will happen now, we'll continually move back and forth on this, cutting this taper down and measuring this periodically when we get close. Now the question may come up is just why didn't you set your compound up? And I think there's 2 good reasons for that. The primary reason is my compound only has about 2 3/4 inch of travel in it. On an MT3, we need 3.19 inches minimum of travel. So the compound does not have enough travel on it. Secondly, I think the angle set up would be around 2 degrees. And if you pull that all the way around here, as you can see, it would be very difficult to get your hand in here to turn the compound with the tailstock setting there. So again, I'm going to move some of these cameras out of the way and get you set back up so you can actually see the taper being cut. Okay, I think it goes without saying, but just in case, I set up this offset from this end to 4 inches over at a rate of 25 thousandths per inch. So for 4 inches, 100 thousandths. I'm going to be cutting on this end. Now, it doesn't make any difference that I measured on this end and going to cut on that end. The taper is 25 thousandths per inch. Actually 50 thousandths per inch. We're on lathe, we're only dealing with half of that. So 25 thousandths per inch. So this could run out to infinity on either end. But on this plane right here, in relation to the location and the direction of the compound, it is set at a offset, at the desired offset. So we're going to start over here and we're going to gradually work it along, and my limitation on this is I'm only limited by the length of my between centers that I can turn on the lathe for the length that I can cut this taper, not the length of my compound down here. So right in this joint on this offset down here would have been an ideal place for some of that high pressure lube. I don't have any of that right now, so I'm just going to put a couple little squirts of just some oil in there. Now we're going to come in here and touch off, and I'm not going to try to hog this out. I'm only going to take about 20 thousandths at a time. And as you can already see, we're cutting a taper. Once it gets to the point here where it's not cutting anymore, I just take it out of gear, come back. I'm going to take about 30 thousandths, see how that does. That's making a nasty stringy chip, so I'm just going to go back to 20 thousandths. Using the lathe dog between centers, like I say, I just don't want to try to take too much at the time. All right, now that we've got a few cuts made there, I'm going to bring the compound on out of the way, and on this small end down here, right on the edge, I'm going to take a measurement. And if we look back on any charts that you find online, you'll see that the small end of an MT3 should be 0.778. So I'm going to set a dimension here on the x-axis, 0.778, and we're currently reading 0.908. So we've got 130 thousandths to go. We'll get close to that, and then I'll take another measurement. That was 30 thousandths again there, and I'm getting that stringy chip, so after this cut, I'm just going to go back to 20 thousandths at the time. Let me grab some of these strings down here before they get picked up by the lathe dog. All right. Now, another thing I think goes without saying, but just to be sure I'm clear here with everyone, this end down here is actually larger than the large end of an MT3. So it doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep running here until I get the small end right. We know we've got the offset correct. If I get the small end right, then I'll know I'll have the proper length. That could run out to infinity here if we had a long enough stock right here. And one other thing I'll say in this, and I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence, but this jig we've made, this tailstock offset, can be used for any kind of taper. It doesn't have to be a Morse taper. It can be used for any taper, and as I said earlier, you're only limited by the length of your lathe bed on what you can turn between center and how much offset. When I made this will give you about 1 inch of offset, which would be 10 times what we're doing right here. That would be a major taper right here if you offset this 1 inch. So let's continue on. We got about 60 more thousandths to go here. Now I'm getting close down here. I want to just be sure I got plenty of turning room down here, which I do. All right, let's take a new measurement. I'm just catching the micrometer on the small end down here, just the edge of the small end, about a third the anvil width. All right, that says we got 12 more thousandths to go. And you know, even that is not that critical. You just want to be sure the length down here gives you enough of this tang on the end down here to eject out of the tailstock or whatever device you may have it in. The key to this whole turning taper is to have the offset set correctly. So I said 12 more thousandths. Yep. All right, let's back out of the way now and take a piece of emery cloth and see if we can get it polished up just a little bit. All right, we're ready to give this a little trial test. I've got a MT3 socket right here. So we won't be losing any of our setup if we pull it out. Before I really seat it in there, I want to be sure I've got enough tang down here to be able to use a drift to punch it out, and I do. And that needs a little more polishing. So what I'm going to do, all right, I'm going to put the lathe in reverse. Take my pipe grinder here. All right, that is locked in there now. It's locked good and tight in there. I can't twist it anymore. So I'll take the drift. All right. And I do see I'm getting some contact all the way down on there. Might need a little bit more polishing, but I think that's good for now. I'm going to get set up to cut the taper on the MT2 piece and be right back. All right, I've got the piece of 3/4 inch rod in there now. And just like the number 3 Morse taper, the number 2 has a 50 thousandths taper per inch, or half of that is 25 thousandths per inch. So let's come in here, set our DRO on 0. I'm sorry, set our indicator on 0. Now 0 out the DRO. And I've got room here that I can move 3 inches. So 3 times 25 thousandths is 75 thousandths. I realize you can't see the indicator now, but that's what it's on. So our offset is correct. All right, let's start cutting another taper. All right, we'll take one more cut and then we'll get a measurement. Our small end on an MT2 needs to be 0.572. That is 0.668. 96 thousandths to go. Okay, I'm beginning to see a little issue here on this. I'm going to have to cut up closer to this shoulder, as short as this piece was. I need to cut the lathe dog off. I don't need anything more than what it's going to take to reach that. So I'm going to take this out, cut that lathe dog off, and be right back. All right, I didn't take the lathe dog off of our workpiece. I left it right on there. Left everything in place. Now I should be able to get, yep, I can reach all the way to my stop down here. All right, we're going to take just a small cut, and then we're going to get another measurement. All right, that's about 10 more thousandths. All right, I'm going to polish this up. But another point I want to make on this is that if you get this too small, as long as your material is long enough down here on the big end that you've kept running and got some extra to work with, if you should happen to get it too small, you can always face off this end down here, as long as you got something to hold on to, hold it into the lathe. Face it off so it doesn't go quite as deep into your receiver, whatever your receiver may be, a tailstock, an adapter, or whatever. If it's too big, if this end is too big, what will happen is this piece will go in and wedge, and you will not be able to eject it out. So before you ever seat it the first time, be sure it will eject. You know, get it snug, test it in the tailstock to be sure it will eject, or in, as I did on that adapter. So what I'm going to do now is just give this a polish, just like I did the other one. I don't have a MT2 sleeve in here that I can test this in. I'll have to carry it outside to that other lathe, but I guess you'll just have to take my word on that, whether or not it works or not. I tell you what, there's just not a whole lot of room to work in there. So I'm going to do this one with the emery cloth. All right, I'm going to carry this one out to that old lathe I spoke about that I had outside out there, and just see if this works. All right, I tested this in that that old wood lathe that I've got outside that I used just to knock the rust off with the pipe sander that you saw me using on here. Works in the tailstock fine. I actually still have my little Harbor Freight mini lathe. It's not set up, but it's on the other side of the shop over here. I went and tried it in the tailstock of it, and it worked in that just as well. So I'm satisfied with this. I'm going to get this taken down now, and we're going to get set up to make use of the tapers we just cut.